Hello, everybody. Welcome to this webinar about forest fires. Thank you for joining us that early. We will start the webinar in a few minutes, just waiting for everybody to connect. So I will now mute myself and we'll talk to you in a few minutes. See more and more people are joining. So hello and welcome to the ones who just connected, and hello again to the others. Glad to have you here for this this webinar about forest fires. Well, happy to welcome everybody, and I'm happy that this event interested so many people. This is quite a particular moment in Europe, as many firefighters in Europe are now getting prepared for another very busy and active season. We already saw some case of forest fires in Europe in the past weeks in a few countries and regions, and I was actually even myself checking the echo flash this morning on the website of the European Commission, and it's actually the flash from yesterday, but they talked about a high or very high fire danger risk in southern and central Portugal, southern and central Spain, southern Italy, coastal Greece, Cyprus, southeast Turkey, North Algeria, and North Tunisia. So we can see that the risks for wildfires is already quite high, and so we believe it can be very helpful to share some information with you in the context of the preparation for these forest fires. So I'm joined here by Steve Warrington from the Country Fire Authority from the state of Victoria in Australia. Good evening, Steve, and thanks a lot for joining us and making some time.
Good evening, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'm here also with Claire Kowalewski from the European Commission and the Directorate-General for Civil Protection, also called DG ECHO. And Claire, you will share with us later in that webinar an update from the EU Civil Protection Mechanism and present how it can help firefighters this summer. Welcome, Claire.
Good morning, thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the participants, and thank you also to my colleague Beatrice Peon, who's the person behind the EENA 112 that you see in the list of people in this this webinar. So we'll start first with presenting what happened in the last season in Australia, especially in January, but the whole bushfires 2019-2020. Steve will share with us the lessons learned from it and his feedback from everything that happened. And then this will be followed by some Q&A where you can ask some questions to Steve. and then this will be followed by Claire's updates on the EU civil protection mechanism. Just wanted to recall that the call is recorded, the webinar is recorded, so everything will be sent to you after this webinar, so you will receive the recording and the presentations. And I would like to remind you as well that you have the possibility to ask questions to the speaker. So for this, you can either raise your hand or write the questions. Write the question on the tool that you're using. And I see already somebody who sends hello from Sardinia. Hi, Daniele. And so, yeah, I guess we can start now. And first of all, in order to give a summary or to recall what happened last January in Australia, I wanted to share with you a video that was made by the Police of New South Wales for the National Emergency Working Group of Emergency Communications Working Group on for New Zealand and Australia, who kindly shared this video with us. So I will share with you this 4 minutes video, because that's a really good introduction to this webinar.
A massive fire burning on Kangaroo Island is virtually unstoppable. Ben Avery.
Australia is on fire, and it's bigger than you think.
Homes are right now under threat. Crews and residents throwing everything they have at a fierce bushfire that's erupted southeast of Brisbane.
Good evening. WA is in the grip of a bushfire emergency tonight.
Firefighters have a very long fight on their hands tonight.
And the emergency is far from over, with the number of fires increasing around the state.
Yeah, spot fires galore down here. We're talking about 60, 70 metre flame heights. 60, 70 metre flame height.
Crazy, dangerous weather took another wild turn today. A string of powerful storm cells unleashing big hail and bursts of damaging wind.
Staff at this nature park were protecting their animals from oncoming bushfires. Now they're having to deal with another extreme.
Supercell hit like a scattergun, and it's not over just yet.
This morning as flash flooding strikes the state, with forecasters warning more torrential rain is on the way and fears of a potential tropical cyclone.
Had fire, rain, and now hail. Who knows what's next?
Well, it's quite hard to speak after that. Just wanted to recall a few figures. In total, we saw 186,000 square kilometers that were burnt. It's a very big area. To give you a comparison, it's an area that is bigger than countries such as Greece or Portugal, for instance. We saw 5,900 buildings destroyed, 34 people killed, and some estimations of up to 1 billion animals that were killed during these bushfires last season. And so the first important fires, just to give you an estimation of the duration, the first important fires were started in September 2019 in Australia, in New South Wales. So it's in the southeast of the country. In November 2019, catastrophic fire danger was declared in the Greater Sydney area for the first time since the introduction of this level after the bushfires in 2009. And January was really the peak months of forest fires, mostly in New South Wales and Victoria. And so I'm very happy to be joined here by Steve Warrington, who's, so Steve, you're the Chief Officer for the Country Fire Authority, which is a fire service in the state of Victoria. And Steve, we are all looking forward to hear your feedback from what happened in the last season. So Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Benet, and thank you very much, everybody, for joining me or giving me the opportunity to talk to you. For me, it's in the evening, and I understand it's in the morning there. So let me go through the presentation. Essentially, as just to let you know that my organisation, we have 53,000 volunteers. These are people that volunteer to go and fight fires, and we have about 1,400 career firefighters as well, across about 1,200 fire stations in our state. And you can see from the picture, it gives you a bit of an idea of the type of activity. So we had, pine plantations that were destroyed, obviously fires in the vicinity of homes and the like. As talked about earlier, these fires started essentially simply from lightning strikes, and this is Mother Nature at her best or worst, whichever way you want to look at it. It started in New South Wales, as Benet said, on the 2nd of September, during higher than average temperatures, very low humidity, gusty winds that led to these very dangerous conditions. The fires themselves, as said, there was 33 people lost their lives, over 3,000 homes destroyed, 3,094 homes destroyed, 7,000 outbuildings and 17 million hectares of land burnt. We had
Sorry to interrupt you. We can't see your presentation. Maybe you, I don't know if there was supposed to be your presentation at that time.
Is that better?
Yes, now we can see it. Thank you, Steve.
My apologies. Sorry, it's completely operator error, and I apologise. So quickly, just the summation there, 33 people lost their lives, 3,000 homes, 7,000 outbuildings. And we had people deployed from right across our country. So we had 6,300 from interstate and indeed people from particularly Canada, US and New Zealand to assist in fighting these tragic fires. The Victorian summary, which is right down in the bottom southwestern part of Australia, if you like, just come off its driest January to August on record. So that's pretty much our winter, was very, very dry. But we responded to New South Wales. So we had about 2,500 crews that deployed into New South Wales, which is north of our border, and to support the fire effort in New South Wales. Our fires in Victoria started on Thursday, November the 21st. That's what we called a Code Red Day, and essentially it's the first Code Red Day that we'd had here in Victoria for over a decade. What's a Code Red? A threshold for a Code Red normally is about a fire danger index, so it's an indices, if you like, of about 150 and above. So it really is quite extreme. Obviously, we get regular bushfires in this part of the world, but those days, this is a Code Red that essentially says, as fire services, we can't now extinguish these fires. Residents need to accept responsibility for their own well-being. We can't control them. They will now destroy homes and they will take lives. And on that particular day, and I said that the highest in 10 years was 150. The indices in a place called Swan Hill was 255. So lots of lightning, what we call dry lightning here, started in and about that time. And that resulted in about 500 fires across the state. So, and that went right up until New Year's Eve, when really these fires really started to take impact. Over 400 residential, 650 non-residential structures have been lost. And of course, community members died here as well. Strike teams. So we had, during these fires for us, a strike team, and excuse me, I'm sure I'm preaching to most of you that will understand this as a group of 5 trucks and a strike team leader vehicle. So we had, as I said before, 2,500 firefighters support interstate. We had about 13 strike teams in New South Wales, so they were fully sufficient, so fully independent. So when they deploy, when we deploy, they will have 5 fire trucks, a leader vehicle. We will send welfare peer support people with them. We will send a mechanical truck, so that for repair trucks, a comms truck, and if you like, those strike teams are fully independent, self-resourced strike teams. So they're deployed. They were supported across the state, and I'll talk a little bit more about aircraft in the next slide, but essentially about 60 aircraft were deployed here as well. The deployment, as I said, welfare support, technical support, mechanical support as well. So that's the support we provided right across our country. So if you like, in Australia, we had support coming from New Zealand, but we supported into New South Wales, into Queensland, to South Australia, Tasmania. And indeed, when fires started in Victoria, we started getting resources coming into our state as well. I said I'd talk a little bit about aviation here. Just in our state alone, we have 50 aircraft. So it's based on a contracted fleet arrangement. So we had 33 firebombing aircraft. We had 114 seats, which is a single engine air attacks, 2 LATs, large air tankers, and 17 firebombing helicopters. During that particular season, this season that just gone, there are about 2,046 dispatches of aircraft just in our state alone, from about November through till March. So aircraft are a primary source of response for us here in our part of the world, and indeed it's an automatic, we call it a priority dispatch program. So essentially now here we've made a decision that on the receipt of a fire, given the particular conditions, we will automatically dispatch an aircraft at exactly the same time as a fire truck. And you'd appreciate, given those circumstances, it's not unusual in that situation to have aircraft over a fire before we have fire trucks on scene. We do that because there's a realisation that if we can slow them down and stop them becoming large, then we've got a bigger chance, if you like, of extinguishing those fires. We had about 100 LATs, which is the large air tankers, deployed interstate. And we had 11 dispatches to support the likes of Tasmania and South Australia. Additionally, we received support from the other states with very large air tankers. So these are the big 747 type aircrafts as well. So that occurred across our state. So aircraft are a big component of fire dispatch when we deploy fire trucks and aircraft, if you like. On the 2nd of January now, our Premier declared what is now known as a state of disaster. And essentially, the first time ever, the powers of the government were unprecedented, and the recommendation was that to evacuate literally hundreds of thousands of people. And understand, for us, this period of time is a holiday. So it's usually Christmas, New Year's holiday, festive season. Many people were actually on holidays, and particularly around our coastal areas, and indeed travelling into these areas where these fires were starting to occur. As a result of the declared state of disaster, it basically meant that warnings went out to the community to pack up your campsites and to head back into the main cities, which was the first time that we'd done that. And understand, and I did say before to someone in this, that we have a system here that we will send a text message, what we call an emergency alert here, across to all residents to let them know that they need to take action on their own. So this state of disaster sent a very clear message to all the people that essentially the message is pretty stark for us. So I've been around a while. In 1983, we had an event called Ash Wednesday. We lost 70 odd people and 2,000 homes. And at that point in time, we had 450 trucks responding to all those fires. If I go forward to 2009, we had a thing called Black Saturday. 173 people lost their life through bushfire. And again, 2,000 homes. We only had the 650 trucks. We've become to the realisation now that as an emergency response agencies, there's limitation of what we can do as a response agency. And what we encourage people to do is plan and prepare as if the emergency service weren't there. And we're finding, whether it's a tsunami event, an earthquake event, or indeed a bushfire that you cannot contain or control, that the best thing people can do is have a plan for themselves to save their own life where they can. So again, the state of disaster enabled us to have a very clear message out to our community. So if I move on, for us, the obvious thing for us is that the conditions seem to be becoming more extreme. So the fire conditions, there seems to be, the season started longer, and I said from the outset, this season for us started back in September and continued on for some months. And just the conditions were hotter, more intense fire season, and our ability to fight these fires and the resources and keep those going. And you can see at the bottom of this particular slide, we have to manage things like fatigue, obviously the large amount of smoke that comes into our community. So people become, if you've got respiratory problems, etc., you have smoke that is just full time in the environment. But the good news here is this, the National Resource Sharing Centre, and in the slide below, although most of you probably won't be able to pick it up, there's actually trucks in the front there are from New South Wales, and the trucks at the back there are CFA, or if you like, trucks from my jurisdiction. So working collaboratively, so you really couldn't tell the difference between you know, whether they were Victorians or New South Wales. We all work shoulder to shoulder. It actually then enabled us, as I said before, to reach out to other agencies that work in similar environments, and you'd understand that that occurs particularly in the United States and Canada. And so we were able to reach out to those agencies who were able to provide us assistance. But indeed, you know, we did have support from across Europe. I think we had, from one stage there, we had people from France, certainly from across from Asia, the Pacific Islands, the Fijians, Tongans. There wouldn't be too many nationalities that at one stage weren't represented in our state. I'm just trying to work out, sorry, go to the next slide. ICC, State Control Centre. So we run an incident at the AIM system, which is very similar to the American NIM system here. So we have a very coordinated approach. So particularly, you'll see in the slide there pictures like the truck in the foreground with the hay. You can understand, literally billions of wildlife destroyed, but obviously a lot of farming communities, a lot of stock loss, sheep, cattle, grazing land as well. And so there's a big effort across the country to try and bring in things in the recovery mode, to bring in things like, and you're seeing here hay that was donated free of charge, carted usually free of charge across the state. But our governance structure to manage these fires is a state control centre, then we have regional centres, and then they cut down to incident centres. And that's the same right across our country, whether you went to the northern part, to the western part of Australia, to New Zealand even. The three tiers are state, region and incident. And indeed, that's the model that we ran here across our state. I'll talk a little bit about here about our training of our firefighters. I said before, we have a lot of volunteers, so literally 50-odd thousand volunteers in our state. So there's a prerequisite, if you like, for our firefighters to go on the fire ground. We're finding that the biggest killer is hazardous trees, and so unfortunately this year we did have five people killed in our state. 3 of those were firefighters, and 2 of those were tree falls. This is where the tree simply have caught fire and you don't know, but simply falls and either crushes your truck or crushes you as an individual, as occurred in one case. So we've mandated now that you are not permitted to go onto the fire ground unless you've done the hazardous tree awareness package. So that's an online training program that is mandatory, that every crew member must have done an entrapment drill. What we're finding here is we've also had fatalities in the past where fire has gone on a grass fire underneath the truck and basically burnt the crews, or gone over the top of the truck. And we saw some crews in New South Wales killed in a what we call a burnover, where the wind picked up the fire and picked up the truck literally on the Victoria, New South Wales, turned the trucks over, incinerated the firefighters. So safety is a big issue for us now. So entrapment drill, everybody must do the entrapment drill. It's a prerequisite to go onto the fire ground. And I've missed the general firefighter right at the start of this. So basic knowledge, understanding fire behaviour, understanding fuel loads, and of course, if you're a crew leader, there's a different skill set required. If you're a truck driver, a different skill set. So, but just to even enter the fire ground, we have these minimum requirements of hazardous tree, entrapment, safety drills, and the like. So I just, again, excuse me, I'll work this out. So part of the, just move this out of the way. Part of the lessons learnt for us as we go along here is we understand the impact of the pool. So I guess the point we'd make here, and it's a hard one to grasp, is that we're now pretty proactive in our communities, and so we've evacuated. So we had coastal areas I talked about at Mallacoota. We actually, and this is a hard concept to grasp, so traditionally we would focus on fighting the fire. But once you recognise the fire front was so big and really difficult to extinguish, you actually then just focus on life, township, critical infrastructure, things such as that. So what we actually did this summer, which was quite different and unique, and we didn't do this, but for the sake of trying to demonstrate what we did, almost turn our back on the main part of the fire. And as I say, just repeating, we didn't do that, but to really highlight some of our practice. And we embedded ourselves into some of these towns before the fire front hit. So the fire we knew was about to hit a town. We would literally go where we could and knock on everybody's door and say, hey, when the fire comes, you will hear a siren, and all the fire trucks and the police officers will turn their siren on. And we want you to come out of your homes at that point and fall back, and that we had 2 fallback zones. We actually then said, right, these houses on the outside of town, we will not defend. It is likely that we will lose these homes, but if you follow our instructions, you will survive the day. So it's a really different approach, but we recognise, and if I talk at Mallacoota was a place that was pretty topical, that we evacuated a lot of people, just conscious of time, I think I'm on it now, that we need to evacuate people from that township. The reality is we actually had to say to our crews, don't go in and extinguish house fires. Do not go drive past house fires that are on fire. We had 15 trucks in Mallacoota. We lost about 150 homes. So we made a conscious decision not to fight the house fires, but to protect life. That was the higher priority for us. So we pulled the community back. We protected life as much as possible. And we actually got the Navy in to rescue them off the beach, and that was further down the track. But of course, when the fire went through, trees came down and these communities were basically shut off from basic services. And interesting enough, we were in there with them. So when there was no basic services for these people, we similarly meant that our crews didn't have the basic services as well. So we were with the community before, during, and literally after the fire event itself. So we put now a lot of emphasis on, and you'll see there 87% for all brigades and community service delivery compliance standard. We put a lot of, that's a service delivery standard, but we put a lot of emphasis now in educating and the communities to understand what their level of responsibility is before the fire comes. And we're pretty upfront now and say to people, hey, if a big fire happens like this, you cannot expect to get a fire truck. We may not be there. The decisions you make on your own will literally determine whether, in many cases, you live or die. So we put as much emphasis in now educating and empowering communities. And I've got a saying here, we want to build resilient communities as opposed to reliant communities. And it's our view that over a period of time, the emergency services, us, have actually started to build communities that are reliant on us to provide the service. You can see here, these fires were so significant that if people relied on a fire truck to arrive, then we would never have enough fire trucks given the amount of property damage that occurred. So that's probably the biggest learning for us. Now, I've covered a fair bit, but I think I said I'd just go for about 25 minutes, and we're there now. So I'm back for you if you have some questions.
Thanks a lot, Steve, for your great presentation. It's now time to ask questions. To do so, you have a possibility to write the questions on the GoToWebinar tool. You can also raise your hand at some point, and I see there's already many questions that have been asked. The first one is from Miguel Angelo Gonçalves Alves. Do you rely on the public to stay calm? So how did that work actually? How prepared are they? Because I guess when you declare the state of emergency, then you have situations of panic and chaos.
Yes, a really good question. We try and do as much of that beforehand, but what we find is the community, in by and large, are fairly apathetic. So they're not interested because they're on holidays. They want to go to the beach, and but the advantage we had here is there was a lot of smoke. There's a lot of media coverage, and people legitimately got scared. And so, in many ways, we had a community that had an appetite or were really keen to listen to what we had to say. But again, some people we couldn't get to. I mean, people living in remote areas of our country need to understand that if you're going to the bush, you need to be well prepared to have your own plan of attack. And if you think about it, you know, even in an urban environment, in a structure fire, I mean, we have a response time measure of 8 minutes. Well, flashover could occur in 2 minutes, and the arrival, and if people haven't evacuated their home, and if they're sitting inside their home waiting for a fire truck, they could probably die, or an ambulance. So there's a whole change in our thinking and approach here, which is about trying to say to people, you need to accept responsibility. We've got a great fire service, a professional fire service. We'll do everything we can, but if you don't take responsibility for your well-being, then you can't expect us to be. In many cases, as a chief officer, I was upfront with my communities to say, if it's too dangerous, I'm not going to compromise the safety and well-being of our crews to go and rescue you. You have a plan of attack to save your life. It's a really different cultural change for people that are used to getting the emergency services to provide that service, if you like.
Okay, thank you. I see many questions that are being asked. And actually, since we talk now about communication with the population, I'll mention two questions here. Maybe you can answer them at the same time. One was this first comment and then a question from Gaurav G. So I quote, your heroic efforts are praiseworthy. What was the mechanism of communication across different agency personnel on scene and with members of the public? Then we have also, I'll just mention another question. Maybe you can respond to both at the same time. From Michael Hallows. Thank you, Steve. Very informative presentations. Would you please let us know how many times authorities used emergency alert during the Victorian fires and what were the benefits to saving lives?
Thank you for your question, Michael. I knew that one was coming. Look, a couple of things here. In our country, there's an app. So it's on your phone, and basically, as a resident, you can get you'll be advised. So you make a zone, and anything in that zone, you will be advised at exactly the same time as an emergency service. So even if it's a false alarm, we now through the app advise the community the same time we get the call. So before the trucks even responded, we're sending a message to the community to say, hey, there's a fire, there's a flood, there's a shark warning, the beaches are not safe to swim on. It's a whole emergency app that we try and tell people there's something happening in your area to give them the heads up. We do not wait until the fire services are on scene or any of the emergency services on scene. We try and warn them as soon as we get a call that something is on, and then they can go and find more information, whether that's online, wherever, but there is that app. The second thing is this emergency alert that Michael just talked about, which essentially says, again, as an incident controller, I can put a geographical area, a circle in an area, and send a text message to everybody in that footprint, if you like. And so you'll get an emergency alert in that footprint to say, hey, you need to, and we've got a standard warning system, you need to stay in place, you need to evacuate now, your worst case scenario. Watch and act is one of them. There are a specific warning will be sent out to let people know on your text message. Again, you will get a text message on your phone, whether you like that or not, to tell you that they're what you should or shouldn't be doing. So that's the emergency alert system. And so again, it reinforces this whole philosophy of connecting and being with our community at the same time. To the original question about our communications on the ground, by and large, we all work off the same big area. We have digital regional radio dispatch network. So most of the fire services are on the one channel, but you can break them down. So if you, again, I'm trying to explain it, a geographical area might be allocated one radio channel. So there's the communications internally amongst the emergency services, and there's also a big part of us is how we communicate and work directly with the community. We take now a view that the more information we can give them, even the risk you run, of course, is that we're giving information that we actually haven't validated. So as an emergency service, we have to go through this whole cultural change and policy position change ourselves to say, well, do we really want to give the public information that we haven't validated and we can't 100% sure know it's right? We've now made a policy position. If we've got information, as soon as we've got it, even before a fire truck, a police car, an ambulance we will give that information to the public so they can then make informed decisions, because their decisions will determine, again, my point, whether they live or die.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask, I see a couple of questions about like the tools and the technologies you're using. There are two questions about the same topic. One is from Liam Wilson and the other one was from Federico Brizio. Do you have any tracking capabilities for the staff? And I'll also, since this is quite related, I'll also ask the question from Björn Erik Munkvold, which is, did you use any digital tools for monitoring the development of the fire and allocate resources?
Yes and yes and yes. We track, we can go online. In fact, I think, again, it's open to the public and track aircraft use. So you can actually see where, and so as a fire person, sometimes, someone rings in and says the fire is here. We've already got an aircraft on scene. We can track where that aircraft is in a digital sense and find out exactly where that is, and probably gives us more information than originally thought, originally provided by the initial caller. We've got tracking on our trucks. We can use that, and it's used at a very low level, primarily for a safety issue. We have the biggest killer here is the wind change that comes through in the afternoon. So a fire will run in a finger, and on a wind change, it'll push the fire, what was a flank, into a head. And that's the biggest killer for us. So we then say to people, look, the wind change is coming through at 5 o'clock, and we remove everybody off that eastern flank. Again, it's probably more safety. We do plotting of fires. So we've got a digital database now that it's called Phoenix, a plotting model, if you like, that will actually, we can use load in fuel loads, load in temperatures, wind speed, etc. So we have fire behaviour analysis now embedded in incident, region and state. So their specialists will actually plot the fires based on terrain, conditions and the like. And so we've got that information we can pass on to both our crews that are making the intelligent decisions for firefighting, but also that information is passed directly to the community. So once again, they can go online and see exactly what we're looking at, to the extent that we can say, look, the fire started at 1 o'clock. If we haven't got this by 3 o'clock, we expect it to be here. By 4 o'clock, we expect it to be here. And of course, during some of these fires, particularly in 2009, they breached all our science. And so it's all backed up if you're invalidated by science. So there is a fair amount of technology involved. We're heavily connected in with what we call the Bureau of Meteorology. So all that meteorology science is embedded in that as well. So yes, we do that. But primarily when you're on the fire ground, and you can probably see by some of these raw pictures, it's just roll up your sleeves, get some wet stuff on red stuff, and get out there and get into it. So, but at the higher level, in some management, yes, there's a lot of technology.
Okay, thank you. And we have a question from Oscar Bax. Hi, Steve. Which was the biggest challenge incident commanders faced during the many operations? So is it saturation, coordination, inefficiencies, etc.? And how did you try to solve them?
Oh, wow. Really good question. Look, in many ways, I think the biggest challenge for us was moving in. One of the biggest was into recovery. In many ways, the fires went through, and we literally had thousands of people stuck on beaches in townships with, and understand trees had come across roads, so people couldn't evacuate. The power had gone. So imagine you can't access a toilet. You don't have basic amenities. You can't get to a doctor. You can't, you're running out of water. And so it's probably the first time that we've really reached out to the military. So we're fairly self-sufficient. We're pretty big. We've got, all the aircraft we probably need. We've got the fire trucks we need. We've got well connected into our community, good ways of communicating and advising community. But this was so big, and just the enormity of it, and our ability to move into recovery, clearing roads up. I mean, thousands and thousands of kilometres of roads that were not safe to travel on, that we had to have so it was bringing the military in to help clean up the roads. So they did tree inspections for us, cut trees down, cleared up roads. The Navy came in, helped evacuate people off beaches to major cities. Look, I know this probably sounds bizarre, but there was a big issue with wildlife. I think we evac'd 15 koalas in one location. So we had the eastern bristlebird, which is an extinct species of bird, or obviously not extinct, but heading that way. And there was a decision made to evacuate and relocate those into a zoo in an effort to protect them. So, you know, all those sort of issues that went well and truly beyond what would be the norm, what I call a norm for us, and having to then reach out to those other agencies and connecting the military, and I'm sure it'd be no different in any other part of the world. They don't like to be told what to do, but integrating their work and their systems in with us. And so it's probably that whole emergency management interaction, if you like, and making sure that's that healthy degree of interoperability. And, you know, people forget that in these periods of time, others, you know, other government departments, other what we call municipalities, councils, there are other interest groups that want to be connected. And so our ability to actually connect into some of those were challenging, but I'd like to think over a period of time we got it. And then afterwards, the huge outpour of support we received from right around the globe, but even within our country. I mean, millions of dollars donated, meeting people's expectation. We actually had to stop people from donating food and clothes and whatever because we got just so overwhelmed by that. But again, if you think about that, managing all those issues is well beyond what we would normally do as a fire agency.
Thank you, Steve. There's still many questions, but I'll try to be cautious with time. And I will now give the floor to Claire. I see that there were actually some questions also related to cooperation between different countries. So Claire's presentation will be very relevant to that. I invite you, maybe Steve, you can have a look also at the questions that were asked and you can respond to them. Maybe also after the presentation, we can take some more time to respond to the other questions. But I'll now give the floor to Claire Kowalewski. So Claire, you work at the European Commission in the Directorate-General for Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations, which is also called DG ECHO. And more specifically, you work at the Emergency Response Coordination Center, also called the ERCC, where you're in charge of preparedness and response for forest fires in Europe. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're also colonel in the French Rescue and Fire Service, and you will present to us an update on the EU civil protection mechanism and what you do at DG ECHO in light on preventing and fighting forest fires in Europe.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Benoit. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Yes. Not the panel of GoToWebinar, just to be sure. No.
Just your presentation, we see.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation, Benoit. So indeed, I'm working at the European Commission. My background is also a firefighter, and I'm a colonel in the French Fire Services. So what I'm going to present to you now, it's what can we do when there is a request for emergencies, when you have situation not like Australia, also like Australia, how we could support all these countries that are more and more need this assistance when there is a need. So what we are doing at the EU level. So, going back. So just a reminder, so what is the Union Civil Protection Mechanism? It's a mechanism, a system that has been created in 2001. In fact, where member states of the European Union said, okay, we should be more prepared to work together. We should strengthen our cooperation. We should improve the level of preparedness, prevention, response. So let's work together. Let's gather all the skills or competencies that we can have all together. Let's share resources also, and we will be stronger all together. So that's why 34 countries are involved in this mechanism. Of course, the member states and the 27 member states. And in addition, we have some countries in the neighborhood of Europe that ask Europe to join this mechanism. And we have, as you know, this country in transition phase in UK, but it's still part until the end of the year. After we'll see part of the mechanism for sure. So it was the objective of the creation of the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. And of course, one of the points is also to be better prepared and to have a better coordination of the EU response within Europe when there is a disaster in Europe and beyond, as you will see in the presentation. So, what is interesting to say? In fact, when a country needs assistance, it can call for international assistance, and it's what we are calling, there is an activation of the mechanism. So since the beginning, since almost 20 years now, for 20 years, 300 times, more than 300 times, the mechanism has been activated. What is interested in your our purpose for today? I will more focus on what we are doing at the EU level, more for the response related to what happened to Australia. So, but what is interesting to see that this is, you can find the data of 2019 and on the right for the last decade or 12 previous year. And you can see that almost it's between 25 and 30% of the activation are related to forest fires. So it's a real topic in Europe, and we really need to be prepared for this. But it's also a real topic, we have seen it worldwide, and we are also here to support countries if they need assistance. So it's what we are doing. So in fact, this mechanism was quite efficient, and the basis of this mechanism is and still the solidarity among member states. So what is happening when a member state is requesting assistance, the neighbor or a bit more far say, okay, yes, I will come to help you, and everything is coordinated in Brussels, in fact, at the EU level, at the Emergency Response Coordination Center called ERCC. So what is happening, and it was really solidarity based. So Spain is going to Portugal, France is going in Italy, and Italy is going to France. And so really we were working on this, and it was just the coordination of national resources, in fact. So what was done? But 2017 has been a pivotal year, I will say, for the EU mechanism, for the EU in general. Because we had during this summer 17 requests of assistance for assistance within Europe and also in the neighborhood. So it has been really quite difficult to cope with all these requests for assistance because the summer has been very dry for people that remember this. The summer has been very dry, very hot. The level of humidity was quite low, strong winds. In fact, all parameters to have a very, very dangerous situation in all southern Europe. And in fact, member states were not able to help each other. So it was really the point for this. And unfortunately, we were not able to help each other. And it was really more or less this first case, it was like this. And if you can see here, there is a small where you have 17 requests for assistance, but in fact, for 5 of them, there was no assistance available at all. And the same, 4 of them were just partially covered. I mean, for example, one country needed 2 additional planes, for example, and we were just able to provide 1. Or they needed assistance for 1 week at least, and in fact, we just could find another country that could help this country just for 2 days. And they had to go back in their own country because it was a real disaster everywhere. And the worst of that has been, of course, the case in Portugal, where in fact what happened during 2 fires, more than 100 people lost their life. And it has been so dramatical. It has been a shock for everybody. As you can imagine, in Australia, you had the Black Saturday. Here we had this day in 2017, these 2 days, and it has been terrible. So the president of the Commission at this point, Juncker, said something very clear, said, okay, the European Union should have something else to offer than condolences to member states. So we need to be more prepared. We thought that we had a good tool. It's not enough. We are not enough prepared for the future. We need to improve our response. So this is what happened after this 2017 very difficult year. So now how it works. So quickly, in fact, we managed to adopt a new legislation thanks to the member states with a lot of negotiation. How could we improve this and our situation? And so how it works? How works the European solidarity and the mechanism now? Of course, when there is a fire in one country, first response is for the national capacities, as usual. It's always like this. Second step, if you need additional resources to your national resources, you can request for assistance via the Emergency Response Coordination Center. That is the coordination center for all response. And in fact, member states they receive, in fact, in the same time, the request. Everything is linked with all member states, and in real time, they receive the request for assistance. So there is no waste of time. There is so it's very, very simple. So member states see that one other member state can request for assistance, is requesting for assistance, and it can spontaneously offer assistance. So say, okay, yes, there is a problem in France. Okay, I'm in Italy, so I would like to go. And also we have what we are calling the European Civil Protection Pool, and it's some capacities that are pre-committed to the Union and say, okay, look, if there is a request, try to call me first because I should be available. I will do my best to be deployed within the umbrella of the EU. And it's still part of the mutual assistance, which is the basis of the European response. So, in fact, it was like this. And we said with this new legislation, we should have more. We should have more resources. We have seen we are not able to help each other in 2017. So what happened? We have created a safety net, additional resources, and they are called rescue. It's this safety net that should be deployed, that could be deployed if there is a request for assistance and the solidarity is not enough, in fact, to respond and to help each other. So concretely, you remember 2017, terrible summer for Europe, and beginning of negotiation with the member states for new legislation. 2019 validation of this new legislation with the member states. So I can tell you at the EU level, it has been quite impressive job to do this. So all member states have been really involved in this. And so now 2020, we start to have the first result of this. And for example, 2020, you can see on this map what are the rescue, we are calling rescue capacities. So it's member states. We have some planes mainly, because usually it's what we are, our helicopters, it's aerial resources that we are sharing most of the time. So we have these days 13 airplanes on standby in countries, mainly in Southern Europe, because you know it's for the moment it's where we have the more fire, in fact, but also in Northern Europe, because now forest fires are not concerning only Southern Europe. Of course, it's everybody is concerned by this. So that's why we have resources available on standby for us. So we have Spain, Italy, Croatia, Greece, Cyprus, France, Sweden. Immediately, these countries said, okay, we want to be part of this because we need to be much more prepared. And I can tell you that in the future, we will have more and more resources like this, ready to be deployed in all these countries if needed. As you can imagine, we have talked about Australia. It's quite far, I will say. So it's difficult to imagine that we are going to send 2 Canadians in Australia. So all these capacities are more for Europe, I will say, and all the neighborhoods. Of course, we can go in the close neighborhood. It's quite easy to do. Australia, I have to say, it's more difficult. But this is for the EU response. But we are also doing things, as I told you, we are doing the coordination for emergencies within Europe, but beyond also. So what are we able to do, in fact, within this Europe mechanism? I just took the last 2 years mission we did, really not in EU, but outside EU, and related to forest fires, because today we are just talking about forest fires, but we are able to deploy the assistance after tropical cyclones, floods, earthquake. It's quite an open type of emergencies that we can answer. So deployment, the past 2 years, we have been in Bolivia, we have been in Israel, we have been in Lebanon. So always after a request of assistance, we are never going in a country where we are not invited to come. So it's the rule, of course. It's one of the main principles, of course. So what are we able to deploy all together with all these 34 member states, teams, of course, firefighters, I will say in case of forest fires, expertise if needed, equipment, in-kind assistance if needed. So it's what we have done in Bolivia, Israel, Lebanon the past 2 years. At this mission, at the same time, Guatemala, we have been last year in Guatemala because they had a lot of fires and they wanted to have some expertise to come to help them to reorganize the system, to see how they could improve the managing system. And so it's also what we are doing. Of course, outside the EU, exercises, we are training and we are training together with, of course, the neighboring countries because they are our close neighbors. And training exercises, it's what we are doing quite a lot also. And within a program we have developed. Another example, in fact, Chile, what happened in Chile 2017, so a bit before. So Chile had to face a lot of fires. It was in February during winter, so of course it was easier for us to deploy the capacities, people, firefighters, because it was winter in France, so it's easier. So Chile requested assistance and went to the EU, so, okay, how could you help us? And very quickly, member states organized themselves, and in less than 1 or 2 days, in fact, 170 people, firefighters were deployed on site. So with 5 EU countries, and of course other countries, okay, I'm not able to send firefighters, but I will send some equipment, some tools, because there is a real need, a gap. And of course, when there is a deployment like this, you always have a coordination team that is going on site just to help you, not you, but to help the country to have a better coordination between the national authorities and all the team deployed. So it's what we are calling a European Union Civil Protection Team. So with all these capacities, I think almost 180 people were deployed from EU in a very, very short time to support our colleagues in Chile. What else? Oh, I'm not able to. Yes. If we are coming back to Australia, because in fact we had this very interesting presentation from Steve before. What happened with Australia? I can tell you, Steve, that everybody was really shocked also, but what was happening in Australia, in your country. And Europe, and you said you had a lot of offers for assistance, and in fact here in Europe a lot of countries were ready to help you. But you said you were well prepared, even if it has been very difficult. You already had some assistance coming from US, from Canada, from New Zealand. In fact, you already had this mechanism, and Australia never requested for additional assistance for this. So that's why we said, because we heard, okay, why EU is not going to help Australia? In fact, because Australia is not requesting for assistance. So that's why. But for sure, you can be sure that we had permanent coordination with Australian authorities, with the ambassador here in Brussels that is working with the institutions in the EU level, or commissioner that called a few times Australian minister to see how things were going and to explain them what we could offer if needed or not, just to be prepared. And of course, at the level of the crisis center, in fact, we were in link every day, and of course, even twice or even more, a few times a day, with in link between the European Emergency Response Coordination Center and with the Crisis Coordination Center in Australia. So we were receiving information, and like this, the idea also was to give some information to EU member states that were ready to help, that wanted to have more information, and like this, we were doing this focal point. And I think it could be also useful. It was useful for Australian authorities, because instead of talking to 34 countries, they were talking to one entity, in fact, to the EU. And it's what we did. We had some information, and we were sharing this information with the member states. So what was done is exactly what I'm saying. We did some coordination meeting. We did all the things with participating states, and and we worked also very closely with the European Union delegation that is in Canberra. What I can tell you, even if we didn't have any requests for assistance, of course we did a first approach to member states, and even without asking anything, 9 countries said immediately, if there is a need, be sure that I will go, and I can send some firefighters, some equipment, and without asking anything, more than 400 firefighters were ready for deployment. They were almost on standby by themselves, say, okay, if needed, we are ready. It's such a difficult days for Australia, so we need to express our solidarity. So it's what we did for Australia. So as you see, more coordination, more sharing of information, but no deployment because no request. So it's quite normal. In fact, the last point that we can offer to countries within Europe, but also outside Europe, it's satellite mapping. And it's what we did at one point. Australia requested for satellite map. It's the program called Copernicus, and we have an emergency management service. And we produced 27 maps. In fact, Australia just called. It was more a New South Wales area. They were calling and said, okay, could you provide us some satellite pictures, because we would like to have another view, another analysis. And we can do this, and it's free. It's part of the exchanges we have with the countries, so they can request for this type of tool, and it's quite interesting for them, I guess. So in a concrete way, it's what we have done. We have produced some satellite maps with analysis. Service provider is behind after and doing the analysis of what happened, in fact. So it's what we have done for the Australian wildfire. And that's it. So I don't know if...
Thank you very much, Claire. There are already some questions that are being asked. You can also write them in the chat. Before all of that, I just want to ask you, Steve and Claire, is it fine for you to stay on the line a few more minutes to be able to respond to all the questions? Okay, so
yes, absolutely.
Yes, of course.
Excellent.
Can I just add to Claire's comments there? One of the things we do have that if you're heading down this track, Claire, with the US and Canada, is those arrangements are in place. So there's actually formal agreements already in place that make the transfer so much easier. And so just bear that in mind. I mean, if we were to have that sort of relationship with Europe, it might be that we could set up more formal arrangements beforehand. But just an observation.
Yes, no. In fact, we fully understand that you have already this agreement with this country. You are used to work together, but just be aware that indeed we can develop some partnership with Europe. We are ready to do this, and you see, we have been to Chile, we have been in other countries, and it's quite easy to organize. And we can do it for sure.
Thank you.
Actually, talking about that, I was wondering from maybe your experience, both of you, how hard is it, like in practice, to manage like a let's say international help? Because of course there's like everybody coming with different languages, different cultures, and different practices also. And so, is that a limitation? Is that like an asset? How do you manage to address all of these challenges?
Is that to me, Benoit?
To both of you, actually.
You can start.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Claire. I mean, we have what we call a National Resource Sharing Centre. It's basically at a national level. I, as a chief, would simply ask for resources, and they will go both within country and external country to look for those resources. Part of that will be where we've got previous arrangements. So as I've said, we have arrangements in place with other countries as we speak, which makes it easier. Particularly, you know, it costs a fair amount of money, and we need to understand what we're up for before we deploy, etc. Once people are in country and understand, you know, the different languages, different religions, different cultures, etc., then you obviously go through an orientation program to tell people, hey, you know, we have snakes here and we have some, you know, wild animals, etc., right through to, hey, be careful of falling trees and the wind change. And then we usually embed some of our people where we can in with the, particularly those that are coming from other countries, embed them in with our team. So again, primarily from a safety point of view, our biggest issue for us is to make sure that, you know, the safety is not compromised. So while we allow them to work in their own area, we make sure that they're well supported as best we can by having liaison people with them as well. So well trained, they'll do an induction training when they arrive in country, spend some time out onto the fire ground, have an induction, have a liaison person or people with them to accommodate needs, etc.
And Benoit, for your question at the EU level, what we are doing, as I told you, the mechanism is also here to be more prepared together. That's why we're organizing quite a lot of training. I don't know, I would say at least 50 exercises, international exercises are organized every year, where all member states can join, and we train to SOPs, to standard operational procedures, SOPs, procedures to work together. We train also to what we are calling the host nation support, because as you said, it's quite difficult. You will have countries that will come, they will speak, as you said, another language. But now I think that all countries from Europe are working with the same, in the same spirit, and we have some SOPs, and they are developed, they are shared, and it's quite really easy now to deploy a team in one country within Europe, even if it's not the same culture, even if it's not the same language, we can do this. And as I said, so if you are deployed outside the EU, we have a coordination team that will help and will do this link that is always needed for having a very good integration of the teams in a foreign country.
Okay, thank you. We received several questions from the participants as well. The first one, and it's a very interesting one, it's from Miguel Angelo Gonçalves Alves, who works for local firefighters organization in Portugal. So when we as firefighters get to know that an EU country needs help and we want to help, we are blocked. What can we do to help other needed countries?
In fact, we are now talking at the institutional level. In fact, I know there is quite a lot of NGOs and always ready to be deployed, but here we are just working with national authorities. So blocked, I don't know what is happening and what does it mean, but in fact, we can be sure that immediately when there is a request for assistance from a country, all capacities are deployed, are mobilized. So at least at the EU level, for the coordination, we have never blocked some people who would like to go to help another country. But for sure, it needs to be coordinated and it needs to be validated by the national authorities. It's not deployment like this. Okay, I would like to help, and I'm going with my two friends. As you know, in Portugal, they really know how it is when it's very difficult, when they have very difficult situation. And it needs to be organized because after it could be a mess. Just imagine you have your organization and you have just people arriving, even if they have a lot of willingness to help you the best they can, but they need to be integrated in your system. So it needs to be official. That's why at the EU level we are just working with the national competencies authorities for civil protection, and it's going quite well. And we have never refused at all any offers.
Yeah, so I guess the answer to Miguel Angelo would be to check that with the national authorities in charge of coordinating that help.
Indeed, the ENPC in Portugal.
Yeah. We just received a question from Dave Swallow. So for both Steve and Claire, what are your thoughts on having an international standard of training and response for wildfire teams similar to the UN INTERAG model for the search and rescue teams? It's a tricky question, I think. Sorry?
Well, perhaps I'll start. I think it'd be really difficult. I mean, we would struggle to have that in our country, let alone at a more global scale. And the other thing for me, I mean, maybe I'm a little parochial, but from the health and safety and well-being of our people, I see that I, as the chief, has the accountability to make sure that my people are trained to the standard that I want. Now, you know, as I say that out loud, it comes across as very parochial, and maybe there is a need for it. But look, I think the other one is we do make some assumptions that the standard of firefighters that come here are to the standard that is commensurate for the environment that you're working in. Look, I just think it would be politically difficult to achieve. It may be an aspirational goal that we could strive for. I mean, that's my pretty candid answer, I think, Benoit.
Yeah, quite a tough question.
Yes, I agree with Steve. I think, of course, it could be a goal, but we have all our differences, and topography is not the same, vegetation is not the same in all countries. So I think it could be very difficult to have a very international organization. It's so specific, but it's true, it could be a goal, but I think it could be very difficult.
Thank you. Next question is from Victor Once. So thanks, Claire. Could you please share some examples of great collaborations between borders from two countries? And when we mean great collaboration, so he precise communication, firefighters, deployment coordination, geofencing alerts to the citizens via several channels, audio and video.
So, a lot of examples. I don't know which one to take. If it's within EU, I think we had so many examples. An example, I can talk about Sweden. What happened in Sweden, in fact, in 2018. 2018, the forest fire season has been quite new. A new paradigm, in fact, has all Northern Europe has been impacted by forest fires, and it's quite new in Europe. And in fact, we have seen a great response and solidarity among member states. I don't have figures in mind, but I think almost more than 10 countries went there. Almost 400 firefighters have been deployed in Sweden to help them for a few weeks. So I think it has been very beautiful example of cooperation and what we are doing. And also the neighborhoods. Finland went on things like this, but also Portugal went in Sweden, that it's quite far. So it's quite important. And in fact, after on site, people are working with the different tools, and we never had any problem with the communication, with any support. It went quite well.
Yeah, thank you. And Sweden is indeed a great example, I think, of the successful European cooperation. Quite a similar question from Oscar Bax. Hi, Claire. How have you managed to coordinate all the teams from different emergency services for them to have the same operation picture and same data at the same time? I think you've already partly answered this question, but if you want to add more elements.
In fact, if it's within you, when people are at in the headquarters, I will say we are sharing some reports, some information. So we have a special tool called CECIT. So it's Common Emergency Communication Information System. So it's a system that all member states have, and in real time we can share information all together. So this is one point. And after, when you are deployed on site, as I told you, if you are different countries deployed or involved in an emergency, we have a coordination team, a European Civil Protection team that is deployed and that is doing this link to share information, to know what is happening. And in fact, you have this team, but also the team deployed are always in link with the Emergency Response Coordination Center if there is a need. We are receiving some reports and that we are sharing with member states. So communication is quite good.
Thank you. And there's one last question to you about directly one detail in your presentation. You were mentioning it in the mission. You were talking about 400 staff, are there firefighters from the Fire and Rescue Service or other agencies such as land management?
No. In fact, so it's the 400 people. It was the people that said, okay, we are ready to be deployed. In fact, data we had coming from member states, and it was mainly firefighters and fire services. But of course, if there is, depending the organization, it could be some people from land management if there is a need. In fact, we always adapt the response. We are talking about firefighters in this case, but we adapt the response to the request. So if there is a gap in the country, in the request, okay, we will need to have more people working on the land management and things like this. Of course, we will try to find this profile and we will deploy this profile.
Yeah. Thank you, Claire. I just to make links also between your two presentations. There was actually a question to you, Steve, from Vandelin Click about asking you if you used drones during this long crisis, because the European Commission is also working on using drones for fighting forest fires. So were they used in Australia as well?
Yes, they were, but not to the extent that I think they could have been. So there was an element of use of drones, but I think this is an area that we could spend a lot more time and investment on to understand how we could better utilise drones. So yes, they were, but not as well as we probably could, and that to me is another learning that could come out of it, of how we could better do that.
Thank you. And then there was actually during your presentation, Steve, but it was more applicable to actually both of you, from Tero Pessonen. You already partly answered it actually. Would it make sense to shift some European firefighting aircraft to Australia for the bushfire season, so when it's winter for us, and then back with the support of Australian resources for the European forest fire season, so these months basically?
So most of the aircraft that we use are on a contract basis. So we have aircraft that we would fit out locally, but a lot of the heavy aircraft comes from the US. So exactly that's the environment. So Northern Hemisphere, obviously during their winter, it's our summer, so we use the aircraft and vice versa. Where we have trouble at the moment is the seasons are getting longer, and so there was quite a clear delineation between those seasons. Now they're starting to overlap, and so there has been some anxiety, and there's been I know New South Wales, Claire, you'd probably be aware, bought their own large air tanker, which is unprecedented. So some of the fire services are starting to purchase their own aircraft, but certainly we're looking at options to avail ourselves of aircraft during the off season. So the answer is yes. Have we looked at Europe? No. I mean, my footnote there too, we've talked about Europe coming to Australia. I'm put my hand up and say I'm more than happy to go to Europe, notwithstanding COVID, of course, but happy to go the other way too. I just thought I'd make that point clear.
So, just your question, Benoit. Just some point also. The very difficult situation, because of course we have to think about this at the EU level. So, okay, let's try to do this. But as Steve said, the forest fire season, the bushfire season is longer and longer. And at one point, we will have some gaps. And what is also very important that this type of aircraft during winter, no matter if it's in the south or in the north of the world, they need quite heavy maintenance. So, and it's maintenance that needs to be done and could last for 1 month, 2 months sometimes. So that's why it's not so easy to organize. Really, and I have to say also in Europe we have forest fires in winter. So you don't see, it's not, of course, you don't have the same media coverage than you could have during summer, because it's probably less impressive and you have it's more in the mountains. But in fact, all the planes we have in Europe, at least for some of them, they are very useful during winter, because we have some winter fires. Mm-hmm. And another part is on maintenance, under maintenance. But of course, it could be also a goal to reach this, but it's a bit difficult.
Yes, indeed, yeah. Before we close this webinar, so first of all, I wanted to say that thank you to everybody who participated and also asked questions. Unfortunately, I could not we could not go through all the questions because there were really a lot. But besides the questions, we also received great comments from firefighters from many countries, from Spain, from Portugal, from Italy, from Croatia, saying that your presentations from both of you were very useful for them, and that they will also disseminate the information shared with their colleagues. So I'm glad that this webinar was helpful to the firefighters. Before we close this webinar, I'd like to ask you one last question. Is that, so as I said, this webinar is mostly attended by European firefighters. What's, like, in a very simple, let's say, sentence or a few sentences, what would you like to say to them? Any tip or any message you would like to tell them before this summer season?
Be safe.
To me? Yeah, I'm clear. I mean, the priority for us is the safety and well-being of our firefighters. And we have a saying, everybody comes home well. It's not just everybody comes home, but mental health, physical health, stay safe, look after your people. I think, for me, that's a #1 priority. So I'm with Claire, stay safe.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's with these words that we can conclude this webinar. So the recording of the webinar and the presentations will be sent to you afterwards, so that you can find again the information that was presented. And myself, I will thank you, Steve and Claire, for finding some time to be here in this very, very interesting webinar. And to the participants, thanks for joining. And also, as a normal European citizen, thank you to everybody for the great job that you're doing to protect us, the people, from forest fires. So thank you to everybody, and keep up the good work.
Thanks, Benoit, and nice to catch you again, Claire. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.